Hi everyone, welcome to the stream discussion tonight. I have some friends here. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about some of the MeToo stuff, the stories, and just the kind of current state of things in Twitch, live streaming, and gaming communities that's in flux right now. So yesterday was kind of a very dark day, to say the least, for a lot of people in these communities because Reckful, who was one of the first big streamers on Twitch, he was a very famous gamer in many different games, World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, for many years, and he passed away yesterday early in the morning. He took his own life. And if you don't know who he is, you will have probably seen many people talking about him, talking about the impact that he's had on their lives. My friend Slush, who's actually in this conversation with us, he made an entire documentary about Reckful. If you don't know who he is and you want to find out more, it's done in a super respectful. It was done far before his death, months ago. But that's a great way to catch up on who he was and how much of an impact he had on people, including myself. For years, I watched him since like 2012. I looked up to him. He had the most amazing World of Warcraft videos and like gameplay, competitive gaming videos that I can ever hope to like achieve. I was never even close to as good as he was at the game. And beyond that, he was an amazing streamer, someone I looked up to. A really bright and creative and interesting person that a lot of people were very close with. I think he helped a lot of people through a lot of things, viewers, friends. It was really sad to see that he lost that battle that he was fighting for many years in terms of mental health and depression. And even though he's gone and he died in such a horrible, tragic way, the truth is that he did have a positive impact on the world, on people. And I think the way to look at it is that those memories, those positive things will live on forever. And it is just a bodily death. And so that's kind of why I want to bring up the topic of mental health, not just Reckful's mental health, but also a lot of people online and streaming or YouTube or whatever, Discord, any online community. But anyways, I want to open the discussion up to you guys to share your thoughts or just kind of whatever input you have on this topic right now.
Of mental health in general, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so Slush, who's below me, if you're watching, he actually is the one who made the Reckful documentary, and you just made a video today and posted it today about, like, kind of updating people about that.
So a lot of people obviously came to the Reckful documentary after he passed, and I was noticing there was quite a few comments that were saying stuff about how, like, because a message in the video is that like we see how like he has improved over time, especially with Dr. K and stuff like that, and that like it's important to keep moving forward. And a lot of people were feeling like, well, I guess it didn't work and stuff like that. And I felt like it was important to say that just because he committed suicide, it doesn't mean that he wasn't making progress. Because he actually was doing better and getting better. And the truth is that like apparently it was something that week that happened that made it a situation where he was sort of like in a relapse, and while he was in that relapse, he made a rash decision, which unfortunately has the consequence of life, which is what suicide is. But that doesn't negate the progress he made before that decision, because that decision it's not indicative of a lack of progress. It's just something that can happen along the way, and I felt it was important to say that.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you said about it being a rash decision, like it appeared to be a very, like, it wasn't a planned thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was, by all accounts, it was, happened very quickly. I
Yeah,
think
he was.
men especially often it goes like this, that it's, what's the word I'm looking for?
Spur of the moment or impulsive.
Yeah, there's
Like
no
a spontaneous
impulsive.
thing.
That's right. Yeah, it's the explosion of emotion, and culminates in the worst possible outcome, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes with exactly what you're saying about you can be making progress, but this is something, if you struggle with mental health, it's a lifetime. It becomes management. It doesn't ever go away, really, especially serious. I mean, I'm pretty sure he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which is not curable. It's a process of managing symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like sometimes it's like one step back, two steps forward kind of thing. Like there's a lot of
There he goes.
like make strides in mental health. It might seem like they're doing well, and then suddenly they might feel like they've like lost progress. But I think that's just how it goes, and it's like a up and down sort of thing. I think Dr. K was saying something about it. I haven't actually watched it yet, but I heard that he was saying something about that as well, actually.
Yeah. Something else I wanted to bring up about all of this, and I'm not gonna say like I know exactly what was the trigger for Reckful, but I know that his lifestyle, his life was based on the internet. His career was based on the internet for many years, for over a decade at this point. And for many of those years, he got comments on streams and on Twitter in this last instance where people were basically, jokingly or not, encouraging him to kill himself. And I think that kind of opens things up to the whole topic of just negativity online, even if, it's been pointed out many times before, but, you see 100,000 positive comments, the human brain is just naturally going to gravitate to 5 really deep hitting and deep cutting negative ones. And that's just how we're wired to think. We're wired to perceive threats and perceive negativity. So I want to say that I think the sort of online environment, and this isn't to blame, we're all kind of a part of this system in a way, but the online environment played a role in, I think, his mental state, and maybe a role in some of, his setbacks. Especially when people are telling him to kill himself. And I've seen clips of him reacting to that and just being like crying a few times on stream, and that's hard to watch. And it's I don't know. I don't even know what the solution is exactly to that, but I think that played a big role.
It's definitely pretty messed up. Like that it's happening at all.
Yeah.
Because he was online for a very long time too, wasn't he? He's been streaming, he's been broadcasting his life
Since
for
the beginning of Twitch.
So maybe a decade? Is that
More than
Yeah,
a bit less?
fair.
A bit less, maybe?
A bit less,
but
yeah.
that blurring then that you would experience between your physical reality and, your online personality, when there's not really clear lines drawn, and it's really, really hard to take a step back and be around the people that really love you and care about you, and be away from the sort of, the negativity is always going to be there. You can't, it's telling people not to do that. It's just never going to be the case. So
I want to read a tweet of his, actually, that I retweeted. It's kind of eerie because a lot of his tweets were so insightful, relevant. So this one, before he died, this one was from March 22nd, and he says, "You should be independent, strong, never show emotion. Well, fuck that. At nights I feel empty. Life could be so much more. I want to share my limited time with friends, make the most out of each moment. I want to run and yell and feel, not spend my days typing this shit." And I can relate, or I can understand where he's coming from. I think he felt, and it's not even that he felt, it's his reality was Twitter, these online sort of outlets were his outlet in a lot of ways. I mean, he had friends, he had close people, but especially now in the current state of the world, you're not just going out to gatherings and parties and friends' houses all the time. And I think that's been especially hard for people. It's just, people need each other for sure.
But even when we can go out and see each other in the flesh when we could, I mean, everyone's sitting there attached to their devices, so exactly. We're already blurring that line, and it is causing pretty widespread mental health issues, the constant connection and the threat of doing something wrong and it being caught on camera and being shared and all of these things. It has a chilling effect. It makes people very, very careful in their actions and interactions with other people because they don't want to do something that goes against the online personality they've created. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. And he was a very open person too, because I think he was I think he didn't like living that way or interacting with people that way. I think he was very open on stream for years because he wanted something authentic, or that's what he was,
he definitely was like, it was really important to him, the authenticity, and especially since a lot of other streamers at the time were, less so, I guess. Like, he was just very much like himself, unfiltered.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that puts pressure. That puts a huge amount of pressure on people.
Like, Breckful's also, like, in his case, I don't know, he's like sort of a unique case in some of these examples. Like, for example, Miskiff put out a video talking about everything recently, and he was saying in his video that, like, if you knew Breckful, that you wouldn't think that it was the messages online that got to him or things like that. It was like a deeper thing for him, and that could be for many people too. But I just mean that, like, and I'm not trying to discount the, like, people sending messages that are, like, messed up, because I think that's, like, really shouldn't happen. But I just think that, like maybe the fact that Breckful seems unique to me as a situation speaks more to that, like, so many people have, like, unique situations, and it's not a simple problem to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's probably the most complicated problem to solve in anyone's life, and that's why you can't just watch a video or read a book or even, just have one therapy session. You need sometimes many people, and sometimes a lot of time in understanding and unraveling the complicated mess you're in. And I think the great thing with Breckful, with his life, is that a lot of people who saw his talks with Dr. K, who saw his progress, because he did make progress, it gave them hope. It gave them direction. I've seen so many comments. For all the negative ones, I've seen 100 positive ones saying, you saved my life, or you gave me hope, or something like that, either to him or to the conversations he had. And that's worth, reminding ourselves of.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that that whole concept of AoE healing is also, like, a good thing. It's obviously not the end-all be-all solution, but it's a really, really good contribution to, like, the whole world of social media, I guess, because I suppose you could say Twitch is kind of, in a way, a social media. Like, if you were to classify YouTube as one, I feel like that means Twitch.
I think Twitch
is definitely social media.
So it's, like, a way that he's using social media to, like, help. He's not helping everyone, but he's helping people, and that's and it's working for some people.
It's normalizing therapy and introducing people to. I mean, people probably have a lot of misconceptions of what therapy actually is. I mean, I've never had therapy myself, and I thought his streams were insightful to me. I didn't know what a session was like, and I learned a lot. And I think it's a lot less scary for someone like myself to maybe seek help if I need it after watching his streams with Dr. K. And I think that's really important, because I think the first step is usually the hardest for people in these cases. So I respect Breckful tremendously for opening up such an intimate setting to all of his fans and haters
And
and everyone, really.
Being open about your own struggles, I think, especially as a young man. I mean, traditionally, it's like you just got to man up, take it on the chin, don't cry, don't feel any kind of emotions, don't show any sort of fragile side to yourself. I mean, if you're a young man and you've grown up watching Wreckful, be really vulnerable in front of huge amounts of people. That's kind of a positive thing to see.
Yeah.
To think, okay, this is actually this should be a normal way that men are able to behave.
Yeah, and I think we need more male role models who are willing to do that sort of thing in the public eye.
I agree.
And in terms of applying all of this to life now and life going forward, I'm sure we all know someone or will meet someone who is going through their own version of what Wreckful went through. I see people in comments all the time, for what that's worth, sharing their struggles. I see people on Twitter. I see people on Discord. I've known people in my real life. I have family that is going through and has gone through depression and different issues like this. And I guess, if nothing else, trying to understand them is definitely worth the effort, if you can. Just being there for someone who needs someone to listen to them, to understand them. Even if you're not an expert, even if you're not a psychologist, you don't have to be to just try and understand someone and give them the time of day and care about their struggles, because it's so common now, and we all know someone who's dealing with that.
And I think when you get to that point, you really do truly believe that literally not one person in the world would care if you disappeared. And I think that's where, like, actually reaching out to your people in your community, if you start seeing them draw away from you or they're acting a bit different, whatever, you don't even have to say anything outwardly. Just be interested and invested in what's going on with them, and just try and be around. Show that you actually love them. Show that they mean something to you.
You care about them.
Yeah, exactly. Because you do. You truly believe that no one's going to care if I just disappeared,
Yeah. So, not to put a cap on that. I think a lot of what we talk about on this stream will end up coming back to that on some level. But I do want to shift gears a little bit and talk about something else that's been going on online, that's been pervasive a lot, which is what I would call sort of like the MeToo movement. And whatever label you want to put on it, it's really what, at the end of the day, it's a lot of women mostly, but not just women, just people coming forward with stories about sexual assault, sexual harassment, outright rape in some cases, just horrible things. And I kind of wanted to talk about why that's going on, or what exactly that is in some of these stories. So I was kind of made aware specifically of something going on in the Smash community, which I don't keep up very closely with, but that there is, especially even today, a lot of stuff coming out. What do you got? So Slush and Lumi, you guys are more in tune with the Smash community than me. What do you guys? Could you guys give us a summary or maybe a rundown of some of the key stuff that's happened there?
Lumi, I think you're more versed with what's going on than I am.
Yeah, I can give a general rundown with any specifics, because we'll probably get into the specifics later. But basically, a lot of really, really well-known commentators and casters and top-level players have been outed in these really awful child sex rings or abuse things, or there's blackmail, and basically the worst things you could think of for a community that's supposed to be welcoming and inclusive of everyone it's supposed to be about the game, right? And it's just really sad that this has been going on, but I think it's really healthy that these things are being taken care of and removed, and it's a painful process, but I do think it's not only important but pivotal to the survival of the scene, and it's probably the same for any other scene within esports or what have you. It's incredibly important that people feel safe and welcomed, and yeah, it's pivotal. It's very important, I think.
So I want to read one of the stories that really just kind of blew me away, or I don't even know what to exactly make of it. So Puppe is kind of a young Smash pro, and this story that he came out with, it was a twit longer, which is the form that many of these stories are coming out in, was from when he was 14. So I'm going to show the stream real quick what Puppe looks like, and what he looked like at 14 rather. So that's him, that little kid right there on the right of this picture. And I'm going to read his twit longer. So I'm going to read his twit longer, and this is just one of the stories. It's not too long, so I can read it. It's titled, "My Experience with Cinepie," who is a commentator in Smash, a woman commentator. Throughout the entire summer of 2016, I had a sexual relationship with Cinepie. She was 24 and I was only 14 during my experiences. I was manipulated, used, and sexualized my entire life. I loved competing in Smash, and when I was 14, that was pretty much all I did. I could only travel to the big tournaments during the summer since they were on weekdays and I had school. Since I was 14 and couldn't drive or anything, I would end up carpooling up to these tournaments. My friends and I would do it on a weekly basis and would travel up to the further away weeklies on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Cinnamon and I were really good friends with each other at the time, from traveling to locals together so much, and we ended up liking each other a lot. Sometime before the summer of 2016, Cinnamon initiated sexual conversations on Snapchat with me, and I would respond, but I never truly knew if anything would come of it. Cinnamon and I would DM on Facebook and Snapchat on a daily basis. The first sexual thing that happened between the two of us happened one night after we got back from one of the tournaments we traveled to. After the journey, we went to the place we were staying at, and once we got there, everyone started playing Smash and then Mario Party after. People started drinking once we got back, which happened regularly once we would reach wherever we would be staying for the night. But I would never drink myself. Something crazy ended up happening in the game we were playing, and since I was a hyper kid, I ran into the hallway towards the bathroom, away from the main room we were all playing in as like a joke pop-off. Cinnamon, who was pretty drunk at the time, then ran after me and tackled me to the ground and started to make out with me while laying on top of me. That incident probably happened for about 15 to 20 seconds, and then after we just went back and kept playing. I was pretty much just in shock the entire time it was happening. I wasn't really opposed to it though, since I was 14 at the time, and I liked her a lot. We basically spent every week together during that summer, so that on top of the sexual things we would do made me start to develop pretty strong feelings towards her. That was one of many times I had a sexual experience with her, but I'm not going to go into details about every single time since some of them are a blur in my mind and I only remember probably 3 or 4 times vividly. We would usually sleep together most nights after the first incident happened, and we would kiss a lot and cuddle during those nights. Our sexual relationship escalated as far as oral sex, but never as far as sexual intercourse. Our pseudo relationship lasted pretty much the entire summer, and she played with my head so often during that time, and it still really fucks with me to this day. I truly believe most of my mental issues stem from that summer and how she treated me. She would tell me things like, "We can get together when you are 18. She would make me periodically delete our Facebook messages and would constantly remind me that I couldn't tell anyone, even though that it was obvious to me. She would consistently gaslight me and make me question myself all the time. I was only 14 and was trying to find myself as a person. Not being able to tell anyone about my experiences ate away at me constantly. Having to see her after this period hurt me a lot and would consistently distract me at tournaments. I would have to play her in doubles tournaments on a weekly basis pretty much, and she would be teaming with her boyfriend during those times. that would especially hurt me. I was super bitter about the whole thing and would BM, that's like bad manner, every set in doubles I played versus them. I never knew how to process these emotions at the time. I honestly still struggle to try and understand them to this day. And then he continues saying that he could write for hours about his experiences, and that he's been depressed for so long, and he's tired of hurting, and he wanted to speak out. So I thought this story was interesting because, I mean, number one, it shows that it's not just women, of course, even though it predominantly is women who are the victims of this kind of thing. But I think things are especially disturbing when it's a minor being manipulated by someone who's older than them in this kind of way. I mean, this guy looks like a kid. He looks like he's 10 when he's 14. He doesn't even look like an older 14-year-old. Like, that to me is quite predatory. So with that in mind, and obviously, like, I think we'd all agree that that's pretty horrible. Is that probably isn't the exact, it's probably not similar to all the stories coming out. Like, what is the rest of the stories? Are they similar to that? Are they more extreme, less crazy?
I think that one was by far the most extreme one.
Yeah,
I would say,
well,
just because
statutory rape.
literal. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, it was like literally pedophilia.
That's
Like,
Yeah.
really fucked up.
Yeah.
like, he doesn't look like an adult, and I know that's not like the goalpost you want to draw for this sort of thing, but I guess it's like a factor.
Just makes it that much
I
worse.
suppose. Yeah, like, it's clear, like, she's so much older than him too, and also a figurehead in the community. At least now, I don't know about back then.
Super
I don't
messed
know.
up.
Yeah, I don't know much about Smash 4 and Ultimate community, but
Right. Yeah.
it's probably by far the worst thing that's come up out of this, and I'm really proud of this person for coming forward, because I think as a man in these times, it can be difficult to open up about that sort of stuff, because I'm sure a lot of people think that he should be the one to take charge and be the force in this relationship that they had, but he was obviously so young and impressionable, and she was just it's like it wasn't fair at all. And I'm really
Consent
proud
as
that he
a
came
child.
up.
There's not even like, there's just absolutely no question with underage. You know, if it's somebody who's 18 and somebody who's 25, they're at least of an age where they're able to consent to what's going on, even if they feel later on like they've been manipulated. Exactly. This is predatory behavior, and she honestly should be charged.
Yeah.
So
she should face the ramifications for being a creep.
100%. On the other side of this, perhaps, I don't know if it's quite on the other side, but kind of alluding to what you were just saying, Amy, you guys, Slush and Lumi, were talking about this other story, which is almost on the other side of the spectrum of this, where it was Westballs and his girlfriend, I think, right, who was 18. What is the story? Like, that one seemed far, like, almost like, not as big, like a...
Well, it's kind of more complicated, because the thing with Senpai and this other Smasher that we're talking about is kind of, I wouldn't say settled, but it's sort of like it's already out, and people have explored the options of what could have and couldn't have happened. But this Westballs thing has just happened hours ago, and I mentioned that girlfriend thing to you earlier because before he hasn't had a chance to respond yet, and people were using the fact that he had dated a younger but legal girl as sort of like grounds to judge his character in a negative light, and I just thought that was a little bit unfair. That's pretty much the gist of it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton of specific cases, but it seems like on the part of this that I'm a little bit more cautionary of, there are some stories where certain people are being kind of dragged in the mud or being called out for something that they probably, like, something that just isn't...
They're taking things that are like more like personal issues and exposing them to the public when they're not actually on the same level as like the more serious I guess like the people who are victims.
The predatory instances.
Yeah, like you can have a toxic relationship, but both parties can still be good individuals with morals and all that.
Yeah.
Sometimes these things get messy, and I think that's true. I mean, I'm sure everyone or a lot of people here and in chat have been through a messy breakup or have seen a messy breakup or even just trauma with relationships, and I think it shouldn't be something that's held against you in these kind of things, or like at least used to
shouldn't be
diminish
relevant
your character.
to the context of like who you are in the community that you belong to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the way that a lot of this has happened, there's just absolutely no hope for redemption either. Like if you're going to bring up things that have happened 10 years ago that were vague at best at the time, if you have felt violated, if you feel like you were violated now about something that happened 10 years ago that you didn't speak up about at the time to the person it was happening with, that's basically saying this person is still just as clueless as they were when we dated 10 years ago, even though I didn't take responsibility and tell them how I felt at the time. How do people redeem themselves? How do people grow and become better people if you're just going to dredge up the past? I mean, if I'm not an online personality or anything.
The point about like they didn't say anything to the person, like a victim didn't say something to the person who abused them at the time. Like, to be fair, that's a challenging thing to do.
But calling people victims, if there hasn't been any like that, I think that is really pushing out people who have been victimized seriously, like Puppy, or like, people who have experienced really severe sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape, saying that I was 18 and this person was 26 and I was a child and I didn't know what red flags were. Like, I'm sorry, you're 18 years old. You have to take a little bit of responsibility for your actions at some point. Women aren't victims. Women, most of the time, know what they're doing, know what they're getting themselves into. The narrative that we are just these delicate little flowers that have absolutely no idea, completely naive to the realities and the horrors of the world is, in my opinion, quite ridiculous and offensive.
Yeah, it's demeaning. It's like saying you're not intelligent or have the emotional intelligence to handle the situations. It's a little bit ridiculous to me, and I find it sort of hypocritical of people like that because it's very sexist, and it's something that I think a lot of them base their like social justice around is sexism, but they're doing it themselves.
Do you think it's a very common thing that people just look at women in that way in the context of these like MeToo cases and stuff like that?
I think there's a lot of prejudice, at least. Like
women
they just assume that the woman is the victim. Exactly. It's like an internalized thing that, and you can argue like how that's caused or why that is, but it needs to be addressed. You can't just hide behind it.
I think that what you're saying, Amy, is totally true. I think in a lot of ways this relates to many social issues actually with groups that feel like they're oppressed or that they're experiencing oppression, in that the truth is a lot of women in these stories, let's even say that they were victimized, they are victimized, and of course that's a given in the particularly horrible stories and the particularly predatory stories as well, especially. But I also I think the reasons for this kind of thing occurring, maybe I will see what you guys think if you agree with me, is that, so the way I view it is that a lot of these men are obviously the ones who are perpetrating this, which are normally men. They also tend to be very successful men, somewhat famous even. They have kind of a lot to lose, and they're in many ways at the top of a certain hierarchy, okay? And I think it's natural that women pursue or they're interested in men who are doing well socially and doing well business-wise, and that's exactly what fame and celebrity brings. It's high-status males. And so, of course, they have more access to women, generally speaking. And because of that, it's almost like they have more power. And when you give men a lot of options, unfortunately, it seems like a lot of them not all of them, but some of them abuse that, and they abuse that power, and they'll mistreat women, and then that worsens women's view of men in general, certainly of that person, and creates these stories of victimhood. But I to bring it around, I think you're right in saying the proper way to view it isn't necessarily that you are a victim and it's just like there's a problem with the men in power abusing their power. That's a fact. Sexually, like sexual power in this case, and influence and all that.
It's men in power that behave like this, though. I think that's obviously we hear about it because you're not going to be like, oh, Joe Blogs up the road maybe touched my leg the other day and made me feel uncomfortable. You're not going to broadcast that out on Twitter because who cares? No one's going to click that. It's not important or it's not interesting unless it's somebody with some status that people know. You're not going to get eyeballs on your story if it's a nobody that you're talking about. And I'm not saying that people,
the high status men do have more access. They do have more options to women.
But it doesn't mean that they are more likely to be like creepy jerks than just regular dudes. Like if you're going to be a creepy weirdo, doesn't matter if you have heaps of followers or if like you're literally no one. I don't think that really has.
Well, I think there might be an explanation for that. I'm of the opinion that people who are highly successful in these sort of fields, like politicians and businessmen, tend to be higher on, what's the word? Sociopathic scale.
Sociopathic.
Yeah. So they tend to view relationships as like a more like a material give and take, and they're
maybe
more
you feel
bound.
a bit untouchable.
Yeah. So I think that the society, or I guess the field, produces or encourages that sort of behavior in a more like what defines success, and that can spill over into the relationships that these people have.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a little bit dog eat dog. I would imagine that you have to be willing to sort of step on people a bit to get to the top.
Going back to the Smash stuff, because Slush, you were telling me about, off stream, you were telling me about like just a lot of bad stuff coming out of there, like particularly today, or was it yesterday maybe? What was the deal with, because it wasn't just Pape's story, right? Like there was other things that were pretty bad.
It's like, it seems like everyone, it has some story coming out about them at this point. That's like, not everyone, but just so many big figures. Like there was the other big one. There was a Captain Zach and Nairo, like Captain Zach was 15 years old, and Nairo and him were, I think they were having sex, or they were having sexual relations for sure, and Nairo was literally paying him thousands of dollars to keep quiet and stuff like that. And I don't know the whole story with that, because I know that like that also includes other Smashers at some points. Like I'm pretty sure the Smasher Ally was banned.
Yeah, it's a bit of a saga.
Yeah. So I don't know the full story on that, but I do know the thing about Nairo. And there might be more involved with that I'm not aware of. I can't remember. I read the tweet longer, but I don't remember it that well.
What is your stance, sort of? Because you were at one point more heavily involved in, I know it was the Melee community, and this is kind of more Smash 4 stuff and like Ultimate stuff, I guess, people.
Right.
But do you think, what is your perception of that community? Has this tainted it, or was it already like, do you think a lot of the stuff was just secrets that were well kept, were open secrets, or
there was everything was all of it. There were open secrets, like what the stuff with like DJ Nintendo, like I'm not surprised at all by that. Like I've seen him like, looking at girls and like talking with his friends, being like yo, we're trying to get that and stuff like that. And like pretty sure like one of the girls that I heard him talking about that was decently young at the time. I couldn't tell you exactly her age anymore. And like I don't know, some of it is surprising. Like I didn't read what it was, but I saw that D1 had a story, and he just seems like such a stand-up guy, so I didn't expect him to be one of the people that was part of this. But I really like what Leffen said. I don't know if you saw what he said, but basically he was like telling his audience on stream that like this is a good thing. This is a good thing that this is happening, because this is, these people are being held accountable, and so like we are purging it, even though it's disappointing to find out that some of the people you liked turned out to be not who you thought they were.
Yeah, don't meet your heroes.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I think there's also like all of this coming out at once. I mean, there's some good to it because you do want to purge communities of like really shitty
Actual
people.
Bad stuff, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Especially communities that attract, like inherently are going to be attractive to children and young, very young people. But at the same time, I think that it kind of demonstrates how important it is to hold your friends accountable and call people out like in a more personal way. Like if you're all hanging around and somebody does or says something that's out of line, broadcasting it online is one way of doing things, but maybe what's more effective in changing people's behavior is to be like, hey, maybe don't do that. That's not cool for these reasons. We're not going to ostracize you and we're not going to absolutely destroy your life and career, but what we're going to do is show you that there's better ways to treat people, to be a decent human being, you know?
Yeah.
It's interesting because Smash has had issues like this in the past, but Twitter wasn't as prevalent and I guess times were different and it was handled differently, but I wouldn't say it was handled worse. I mean, I know cases where similar instances of abuse happened and people were talked to privately and given a timeout from the scene for like, let's say 2 years or what have you, and given pretty
stipulations.
Yeah, like given stipulations in order to return. Like you need to have this amount of time without any incidents. You need to show that you've changed your friends and your family, and maybe go to therapy or whatnot. And at least in my opinion, these things have been more effective in. The goal should be to rehabilitate, not to excommunicate, right?
Exactly what I want.
Because those people who I know who went through those things are not only good community members, but they're upstanding community members. They've been like, I wouldn't say like rehabilitated is such a catchy word, but they're good people and they've learned. And I actually saw that one of the people that's very, very vocal about getting people out of the community actually was involved with something, I think 6 or 7 years ago, where she gave that a person the opportunity and she talked to him privately and told him, you know, what you're doing is uncomfortable for me and I don't like that. And they're cool now. And this person is part of the community and they're a good standing member of the community. And I think that should be the default road taken. But I think if it's a continual problem where they just don't, like they just hide from the problem and they don't get help and they keep reoffending, then that's the time for like a blast.
There's definitely a line that needs to be drawn at some point to say like, you're no longer welcome here.
Well, it's a privilege to some degree to be a part of these communities and to be able to be like a role model for people and these kind of things. But then, there is an issue with, I don't know, I feel like just completely, you know, ostracizing entire groups of people is just going to make men more mad and maybe more volatile towards women, and the reverse, women to be more viewing their experiences, viewing every experience as potentially predatory or potentially, you know, so it's like drilling in this narrative that all men are potential rapists and all women are potential victims, which is like super toxic and the worst thing basically for gender relations.
It creates division when the goal should be harmony.
Exactly, and mutual respect and
I think for every in order to make something like these things truly productive and truly going forward and actually like a purge for the better, people have to be honest. I mean, on both sides, they have to be absolutely honest, and they have to be like Lumi was saying, they have to be doing this with the intention of, you know, and sometimes it doesn't even require calling someone out publicly, you know, even privately for calling someone out. It's with the intention of, you have to do better. This has to be improved. I don't like how this feels, you know, communicating things effectively and learning from it. But something I saw that you linked me, Lumi, was this tweet. And I think this tweet is somewhat representative of a common sentiment with these kinds of stories, which is that it was somebody quoting D1 who had a twit longer, like in response to, I think, an accusation. And if I'm not mistaken, D1 was saying that, you know, he was really drunk one night, and some of the events that happened, he just doesn't remember. Like, he was blackout drunk. And the tweet quoting him said, like, what do you mean? Just lie and act like you remember what happened, as if to say, like, you can't...
Yeah, like, have some decency, basically. Like, even if you... He said, even if you legitimately blacked out and don't remember, just lie and say you remember it all and own up to it all. Which is,
and this
like,
isn't... It's not a sarcastic comment. This is someone being genuine.
I do think it's... I don't know how common a take that is. I feel like that's an especially bad take.
Yeah,
that is an especially bad
It is, but
just lie.
It's true that is an especially bad thing, but I think the point is, with a lot of these stories and a lot of sometimes people reacting to them, I get the sense that there is sort of this scorched earth policy where it's like, there is no goal of forgiveness. I mean, we definitely see this with cancel culture, which I think is kind of a separate thing from this, but, you know, where the goal isn't forgiveness or learning or understanding or improving. It's just, this person is awful, never associate with them again, blacklist them from everything. And it's like, no, that can't be a way forward at all. It's just a self-consuming...
There needs to be avenues for redemption.
Yeah,
like
you were saying before, Lumi, about and / drawing, there obviously needs to be a line drawn. If you don't show any kind of excitement to change your life and be a better person, and you just keep being a jerk, then, you shouldn't be welcome.
A good example of that line being crossed was with the offline TV stuff and Fedmeister, because people were lamenting offline TV for dragging it out and, you know, dragging through the mud and all that. But it became clear over the next couple of days that they had given him so many chances to better himself and to show that he had changed, and he just continually failed their expectations. And I think at that moment it's probably acceptable to drag him through the mud, because at least like blast him on public, because I think he was given enough chances, but a lot of these people are not. And I do respect offline TV a lot for taking those steps first.
And certain people handle this, or certain like orgs and people handle this better than others. Like, I know Method, I mean, I don't know the details, but I know, like, some of the top people were really doing some bad, awful things, and, like, the whole organization seems to be falling apart. People don't even want to associate with that. These things hold a lot of there's a lot of power in these accusations, and rightfully so. But I think, you know, you have to also, I'm not saying any of these super big takedowns or whatever were unjustified, but these things can tear apart entire companies, entire livelihoods, entire lives. I have seen a few stories where it's like, I'm not going to specifically reference who or what, but it's like, why are you even posting this? Like, this is a non-issue. This isn't even, this story, as you describe it, is completely like just an awkward interaction. Like, there's several stories where it's just awkward flirting and that nothing else happens. It's like, come on. I mean, why are you...
Also, there's a lot of stories I've read about things that have happened when both parties have been super drunk, which... I mean, super great, very gray area, but there is...
It's a gray area. It's
like fundamental. You can't... There's no...
Consenting while being drunk, okay, but if both people are completely wasted and stuff happens, then it's not... Personally, I think this is, again, you're not taking responsibility for your own behavior. If I get super wasted and like go home with someone and go into their bed, you're suggesting through the actions that, you know, you're there. You're not just going home to sleep in someone's bed, because it's like to say otherwise, I think is intellectually dishonest.
And I think most people here would agree that men are not good at picking up signals.
Exactly.
I know myself. I've definitely missed signals.
Men are definitely not good at picking up signals.
I am not good at picking up like subtleties and such in interactions. And I can, like, it's not unfathomable to to see that someone like would expect that things are progressing along nicely and everyone's having a good time, and then the other party completely sees it differently. Mm-hmm. Just because there was a lack of open communication,
actual communication. And I think that part of this is really that women need to feel, I don't know, able to clearly state what they are and are not comfortable with from the get-go. Like,
exactly.
If you're not comfortable, say no, and say it very clearly. I would say 99% of men would be like, oh. Most men I know would be mortified if they thought that they had crossed a line with a woman and made her feel violated or uncomfortable.
Here's
but if you don't tell them.
So one narrative I saw kind of being parroted around on Twitter was that, like, normalize asking a girl if it's okay, like if it's okay to touch her or if it's okay to kiss and all these things. And in my mind, like, so generally speaking, the only time that would ever be necessary is like if you really just don't know someone. Like, if you're trying to hook up with someone that you just met that night, I could see that being a factor. But a good way to avoid that, like, having to ask them is just, if you know someone really well, like if you've been dating someone for weeks or months, you don't have to ask them, hey, can I touch you? Hey, can we kiss? You know what I mean? Like, that's something that comes with time.
Would you really want relationships to be devoid of that?
Yeah, like, please sign here.
Right.
If you would like to be caressed.
I think this is where
in perpetuity.
What's the catchphrase? It's not the lack of no. It's not saying no, but the lack of an enthusiastic yes, or something like that about consent. Mm-hmm. But I think that's just honestly, that's even if you're going home with someone you've just met them, you can create boundaries as things are happening. If you're comfortable with one thing but not another, you just say, no thanks, not that, but how about this thing instead? Or I just want to hook up. Yeah. Let's just kiss, not do anything else. You can say these things to people. That's totally fine and reasonable, and in fact makes it more enjoyable. Asking is one of the least sexy things that I could possibly imagine. Like, excuse me, miss, may I please touch your breast now?
You see, that's a hot topic.
Thank you.
I've read through these Twitlongers and such that asking is such an important part. But in my experience and from my friends during university times and whatnot, that was like, I wouldn't say a no-no, but it's definitely a vibe killer.
Yeah,
I would
you
say.
Want that? Like, if that's something you're into, then make that clear from the get-go. Don't expect everyone to ask. Say, hey, before you do anything, make sure you ask, and I will give consent.
If it's important to you, then maybe you should be the one asking too, or bringing up the conversation.
Right.
I think both parties need to take responsibility.
I agree.
The idea of a lack of an enthusiastic yes, it's like this problem with like the language barrier thing, where it's like you're telling them to not take the word yes for its meaning. And I feel like I constantly see this sort of thing brought up on Twitter, at least, where it's like, it comes back to like that classic, like, men are bad, not all men, like that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and they're like, of course not all men, but it's like, it always comes down to this like lack of clarity on,
the language has to be concise and clear.
Right, I see what you're saying.
And obvious.
Like, people put out I think that's almost a product of, I wouldn't say just of social media, but social media certainly makes that worse, where it's almost like the clickbait effect, where it's like, no, I'm just saying this to get a message across, but I don't literally mean all men, which is so fucking stupid. You're right. It's like, then what is the point of language? Like,
a lot of these labels are used to garner attention rather than convey meaning, or at least the genuine meaning.
Expectation that you should know what I actually mean.
Yeah,
like if you were a good person, you would know. And
I don't want to derail the conversation, but I ran into this problem with all cops are bastards. The ACAB.
Yes.
And like when I talk to someone for a while, I'm like, I actually agree with most of what you're saying, but that label is just so atrocious.
So dumb.
It is
so dumb.
It's such a divisive label. Like, it's got to be redone.
It's just being inflammatory. It's just trying to be an edgelord. Like, it's just like edgy, hate cops, down with authority.
Yeah.
Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with all that we said being understood, I mean, I also want to say that I want to make it clear that genuinely I do think there is a big problem at the root of all of this, because I have been to a few different parties at like conventions like TwitchCon and BlizzCon, and while I haven't like outright seen or heard of like direct sexual misconduct, mostly because I'm not in any of these inner circles to even know, but I've seen like interactions at parties where it's like clearly there's a girl who's very uncomfortable by somebody talking to them, and it's just like, oh, like, and the guy keeps pushing, and it's like, yeah, I mean, something needs to be changed about that, or like done to where, you know what I mean? Like there's those instances where even, okay, like withholding that, I'm not saying these people need to have twit-longers written about them or being called out, but it's almost like there is, I almost want to say women should stick up for themselves more or something, where it's like,
no, because then you're just a bitch. If you're like, dude, stop talking to me, I'm not interested.
Yeah,
then it's like, oh my god, that chick is a fucking absolute bitch. So you have to sort of be like, well,
yep.
Yeah, I've definitely seen cases where like
culture, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like, the
it's
culture
so
around
complicated.
should be such that like women can comfortably stick up for themselves, and it's interpreted the way it should be and handled the way it should be.
And then if a man steps in, God forbid, it's like, oh, you're a simp,
White knight.
Or a white knight,
Yeah.
And it depends on the situation, of course, but we all know those instances of like where it's just uncomfortable. Maybe it doesn't amount to anything, but yeah.
I think it's harmless for the most part, but there is definitely, okay, I feel like, and please call me out if I'm wrong here, but I really feel like the gaming community is maybe attracts men who, like, a certain community of men who maybe haven't been super successful or very well practiced with interacting with women.
I would agree with that.
So then you're at a convention and it's kind of overwhelming anyway, and there's some hot girls in skimpy cosplay, and you're like, oh shit, like I want to go talk to her.
You like mix in alcohol and other drugs.
So here's
like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
It's funny because it's like a lot of the same people who are like pro gamers, especially with pro gamers, this is true. Very oftentimes, almost all of their lives, they've been totally unsuccessful.
Awkward, like nerds.
They've been completely ignored by girls, and then they get famous, they get really good at a game, they get hit up constantly. It's almost like, I don't want to say that justifies, obviously, like outright sexual harassment, but you have to give a little bit of leniency for awkward interactions, for like mistakes that they make, because it's like this person has no experience with women.
Helps understand.
I do want to like step in here a little bit and say that like I do think that probably does have a contribution to why you're seeing this like prevalence in these gaming communities, but I don't think I'm not so sure that it's like the driving force or anything. I think it's really a multitude of things.
Absolutely.
Like,
I agree.
There's all sorts of like issues that are like seem to be specific to certain types of gaming communities and stuff like that. I also think that there's like overlap and similarity between the Smash community and like the speedrunning community. They attract a similar group of people and have similar environments. And I don't know. I think that there's just a whole bunch of things going on there as to why, like, especially since like when you have people like Senpai and like people like DJ Nintendo and the Moon, like I don't know what the case was at the Moon, but I feel like they weren't the kind of people who like needed to be big in the Smash community to start getting action or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, what you're saying, Amy, though, is totally right. I mean, guys online, guys in gaming communities, guys on YouTube or Twitch or whatever, these online platforms, from my experience, like, okay, Discord's a great example. Like, I'm not an expert in, I'm not a psychologist, okay? But I can tell you the majority of men I've talked to, like in random Discord servers are just like nerdy, kind of socially awkward types. maybe on the spectrum, and that's fine. But it makes sense that they would congregate amongst nerdy things, nerdy quote unquote, even though it's becoming more mainstream.
It's
now.
more comfortable.
Yeah, and it's more comfortable for them, and I think, yeah, like I think another thing, I don't know how I want to pose this, but it's just I'm trying to make sense of it, so maybe you guys could weigh in. Something I'm seeing is this narrative, this perspective that it's almost like all of the blame or all of the onus is on men, and in certain instances, sure, it is. But, okay, so take that same type of man that I'm talking about, okay, that same demographic of men, and juxtapose it with what I see on my Twitter timeline everywhere, what I see on Twitch everywhere. And me and Sam kind of touched on this in both of our videos that we uploaded, if you guys want to check them out. Slush on YouTube, and you know who I am. So anyways, which is that a lot of girls on these platforms, you know, they advertise themselves very sexually, very openly, very sexually. They have OnlyFans. They have post nudes or like very lewd pictures of themselves on all over their platforms. And it's like, look, I'm not saying, obviously, you know, I'm not saying you deserve to be harassed or like whatever, like hurt by anyone, but
you're welcoming some amount of it.
You know, when you're putting yourself in that environment,
the way you depict yourself can also indicate how people treat you.
Yes,
and even if it's like,
well,
yeah,
I think this is a bit of a paradox, because it's on the one hand, don't sexualize me as a woman, don't objectify me. I have talents and intellect beyond my physical appearance. But on the other hand, you completely zero in on your physical appearance as the center point of your online personality. So if you are positioning yourself as a sexual icon to some degree, and you're profiting off of being sexual, that of course people are going to be sliding into your DMs, being like, "Hey, baby," you know,
I think that you welcome like what you. It's like you're consenting to a certain amount of it. Is what there's definitely like people who do that should not be like. It's not okay to sexually abuse them in any way or do anything, you know what I mean, or harass them or whatever. But it's also unfair for them if they were to try and treat any sort of sexualization as a problem. I think a perfect example is what happened to Technicals. He made a video about ESAM, and in the beginning of that video, ESAM's girlfriend, if you don't know, ESAM is a Smash Ultimate player. So ESAM's girlfriend at the time was selling lewd content on Patreon. So Technicals donated, paid to like get some pictures from the Patreon, and then made a joke in the beginning of his video that he was masturbating to it. And then now, even though this video came out a while ago, now she was saying that she felt like she didn't consent to this, and this is sexual harassment. And it's like you sold him like lewd pictures, and now you're
selling him pictures to masturbate to. That's the point.
Yeah, everyone knows what's going on. It's not. No one's here to. No one's here to.
People aren't just putting it on the wall as a nice. Isn't that a beautiful photograph?
The really messed up thing was that because of that, he was put on a list alongside people like Senpai and D1, and that's the most egregious part.
Yeah,
it's one thing if she has a personal problem with him. I mean, I would imagine she does. But putting him on that list is so. It's not only
she didn't put him on the list; someone else did.
Yeah, someone else did. Yeah, sorry, I need to clarify that.
Dark Wizzy,
but it's so harmful to victims who come forward.
Oh yeah,
and him, of course.
Yeah,
no, I was gonna say
I think that's
that.
It's defeating the entire purpose of if like we were all agreeing before, the truly despicable bad stuff, we all agree should be purged. It's a good thing when it's called out. It's a good thing when people are speaking up for years sometimes of abuse and all this. But when you are putting someone like Technicals who makes a joke about jerking off to your paid for porn that you have publicly available, you're harming the entire point of this. You're making it men versus women. You're making it, I don't like what you said versus we have to remove rape, you know.
It's trivializing the bigger issue.
Yeah.
And when you do that, people do start being like, well, all of this is bullshit. Like, none of this is going to be taken seriously now. Or, you know, everyone's just autistic screeching about cancel culture. Like, it's not actually going to be effective in the long run if we just flood it with bullshit like this, you know?
Yeah.
And like you said before, like I think there's just a really big problem is that so much of this stuff is in a gray area where it's like, it's not exactly sure, like easy to tell or easy to say if certain things that happen are bad or good. Not everything is going to be like extreme, like very, very bad or very not bad or whatever. So like there is a lot of stuff that's gray area, and people are really like, it seems that when people congregate as in like the social media town square, they forget that they are unable to remember that there is that these things are gray area and that we should treat them as such, and that we should recognize nuance, and that there are cases where it doesn't seem that bad, where it might actually be pretty bad, and there are cases where it does people are portraying it as if it's like terrible, but it's actually not that bad.
Yeah,
that's right. And honestly, I would say almost every single person who is sexually active has been in the gray area at some point. It would surprise me if anyone has been like, no, I've never had like a weird, awkward, or questionable sexual encounter or anything of that sort with anyone. Yeah. So, you know, dragging this shit out and airing your dirty laundry for everyone to see, I don't know, it just strikes me as a bit off, to be honest.
I think these things are inherently messy, and I don't see like a realistic way of making them clean. A lot of it is subtle in body language and drugs and alcohol.
Super personal, and like probably shouldn't be everyone getting,
personally,
you know, like just bring it up with the person.
My kind of remedy or like way of avoiding this, and I would say good advice for most men who maybe, not that I feel like, oh, this is a big problem that I can't ever date a girl or talk to a girl or whatever. I don't feel that way. I guess some men do, but I think the best way to avoid this, and how I feel like I've avoided this, is just not being into hookup culture, not even thinking about, you know, getting with someone while very drunk or while they're very drunk, especially if I don't know them very well. And like, you know, a lot of these problems are avoided when you really know someone, when you're really trying to establish some sort of meaningful relationship with someone. Usually these kinds of this type of confusion doesn't happen. And barring that, I guess if you're really set on like doing hookups and that kind of stuff, which of course happens amongst adults, I guess then in that case you have to be super communicative and super clear, and probably still avoiding like drugs and anything that might inhibit your judgment and their judgment. Seems to be a good idea.
You need to be very responsible if you're engaging in that sort of activity on a consistent basis, especially with things like alcohol and drugs. I think it's really important for both parties.
And women, exactly. Like, you know, women have to be extremely, I mean, if you're a woman engaging in hookup culture, you have to be super careful. You have to, you know. Yeah. Probably not a good idea to get super, super messed up and just go home with random dudes, because you never know what is going to happen. So I think that there is a responsibility on both parties to be, you know, aware of what's going on and speak up if you're uncomfortable.
Definitely.
I have a friend who doesn't drink, and when he's on dates with girls in a place that they can get drinks, he asks them in advance, like, hey, I don't drink, so do you mind like limiting like how much you have to like one drink or maybe two, but ideally less, just so like I don't like there's nothing
interesting,
no lack of clarity or whatever.
That's really respectful.
Yeah,
and doing it in advance. So that's exactly basically what we're saying. Like, he has a preference to not drink, so obviously he's not going to want to have, you know, go home with someone who is 8 beers deep or something like that.
Yeah, like, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what you said about both sides need to take responsibility not necessarily for the same things, by the way, but in their own way,
Yeah.
is so important. And I think that's missing a little bit, because a lot of this is men have to do better, and that's all there is to it. And it's like, you know, people are gonna, when that narrative is the only thing being said, or, you know, maybe for some men blaming women or something, or saying they're all lying or they're all embellishing. The problem is it creates more division, it creates more separation. And going back to like what the whole start of this whole stream, if we need more connection, we need more like understanding of each other, we need more love in this world. I think we can all agree. And it's just people are they're hurting, they're sad, they're in pain, they're lonely, especially now, especially with what's going on in the world now. It's something that I don't want. Any way that people can come together rather than being divided is the way forward. And taking responsibility seems to be a great way to do that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Well said.
And yeah, keep tabs on your friends and your communities, and speak to people if you think that they're being out of line before it gets to this point, I guess, rather than just watching people fuck up over and over again and not doing anything about it.
Well, I think we delved pretty deep into these topics. I think that's about covers it. What I wanted to talk about on this stream. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining me, Slush. Check out his latest videos. Check out we both posted videos recently, and he definitely put a lot of work into it.
They kind of complement each other, actually.
They do. His video, he has a video about the rise and fall of Twitch IRL, and the rise of just chatting on Twitch. And I made one about parasocial relationships on Twitch, and I think they're both pretty related and complement each other really well. Amy, thanks for I don't want to frame you as like the token woman or something, but the thing is, you happen to be a woman, and you're very reasonable with your points on this, and I value that. I do. I think we all do.
Reasonable women. Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, Lumi, thank you for joining, man. I think you really brought up some really good points. I'm happy you were here.
No, I enjoyed myself. I thought it was productive, and everyone's well-spoken and reasonable. That's all you can ask for.
Yeah, this is great.
I agree.
All right, guys.
Well,
cool. I'm gonna end the stream.
All right.
All right, peace.
Later.
Bye.